She was about to become a mother for the first time with an 8-month pregnancy. She was 23 years old when horror took her by surprise from behind within her own home. This in Missouri, United States. Bobby Joe and her husband, Joe Stinnett, had a terrier dog breeding facility on their property. These small dogs that many in rural areas used to combat rats and other pests. And they did this to supplement their economy. Coincidentally, it would be this activity that would lead to the cruel and violent death of Bobby Joe. In today's video, I'm going to tell you about the case of Lisa Montgomery, a girl who is sentenced to death. I'm going to start this video by telling you a little about the biography of these two women, the killer and the victim. Let's start with the victim, Bobby Joe Stinnett. She was born and died in the month of December. She was born on the 4th of 81 and died on the 16th of 2004 at the age of 23. She was smart but shy. She had a younger brother whom she adored, and she married a lifelong friend in 2003, 2 years after finishing her high school with honors. She and her husband Seb, also 23 years old, worked at the Kawasaki factory. They also raised terrier dogs at home. The extra dollars came in handy, especially now that they were expecting their first child. Let's say she was a normal girl with a very promising future. On the other hand, Lisa Mary Montgomery was 36 years old when she became the cruel murderer of Bobby Joe. She carried a truly scary story, as usually happens with all these murderers. She was born on February 27, 1968. In a chaotic family. She was abused by her stepfather for many years, and in her teens sought refuge in alcohol. When she was 14 years old, her mother discovered the abuse, but they say she ended up blaming her and took her to point a gun at her threateningly. She ended up running away from home at 18 to marry Carl Bowman. They had 4 children, and in 1990, on medical advice, she decided to have an operation so she wouldn't have any more children. She had her tubes tied. They briefly separated in 93, but they mended their relationship. In 98, he was the one who decided to separate for good. Sometime later, Lisa met another separated man, the electrician Kevin Montgomery, who already had 3 children, and they got married in 2000. The couple moved in with their 7 children, his 3 and her 4, and Kevin's parents 6 days before the crime. Bobby Joe, Lisa's first husband, had requested custody of 2 of the 4 children they had together. By then, Lisa had been pretending to be pregnant with Kevin's child for some time. Let's move on to how this horrendous crime begins. Bobby Joe and Lisa Montgomery met online in a chat room for the breed of dogs they both raised, which was called Rudder Shudder. They exchanged emails and for a long time shared good conversations. In that chat, Bobby Joe happily announced that she was expecting her first child in January 2005. Another participant, Lisa Montgomery from Kansas, also announced that she had been pregnant with twins, but one had died, and she was expecting to give birth to the one who had survived in December. The conversations revolved around their lives, which seemed to have a lot in common, supposedly. In April 2004, Bobby Joe and Lisa, with their quote-unquote pregnancies just beginning, met at a terrier show in Kansas. There's a picture from this dog show that I'm going to leave here that shows them together, and at this point everything was normal. Let's say normal in a certain way. They continued to exchange messages about the good and bad times of pregnancies, name ideas, and what they should be buying for the babies. Towards the end of 2004, Jason Dawson, who was a friend of Bobby Joe, a breeder and also a participant in the chat, received an email from a woman named Darlene Fisher, whom he did not know. Darlene asked Dawson if he knew of anyone who wanted to give puppies up for adoption. She wanted to buy one for her children, and Dawson, who knew that Bobby Joe had several, gave her his name and his website. Darlene contacted Bobby Joe by mail and also through the chat, but this time her username in the forum was Fisher4Kids, and she told the group members that she lived in Fairfax, Missouri, a 25-minute drive from Bobby Joe's house. What no one knew was that this supposed person, identifying herself as Darlene Fisher, was actually Lisa Montgomery from Kansas. Everything was meticulously planned by Lisa. The message from Darlene to Bobby Joe in the breeders' chat on Wednesday, December 15, 2004 said, "Jason Dawson recommended I contact you, and since I couldn't find you by mail or phone, I'm writing you here. Please contact me as soon as possible because we are considering buying one of your puppies, and I would like to ask you a couple of questions. Bobby Joe, who was very careful and demanding with her sales because she loved her dogs, responded later that same day. Darling, I'm sending you the address by mail so we can meet. I hope this mail reaches you. It's a pleasure chatting with you on Messenger, and I hope to continue doing so tomorrow. Thank you. Let's talk soon, darling. Have a nice afternoon, Bobby. The appointment was for the next day, Thursday, September 16, 2004, at 2:30 in the afternoon. That Thursday was a normal and ordinary day. Joe Stinnett went out to work as he always did, and left Bobby Joe at home with the dogs, waiting for the arrival of a certain Darling Fisher who wanted to see the puppies. Around 2:15, Bobby Joe called his mother, Becky Harper. He was telling her that he was waiting for this woman interested in his dogs when suddenly they knocked on the door. It was 2:30, and at that moment he cut off communication. It would be the last time that mother and daughter would speak. Bobby Joe opened the door and let in who he believed to be Darling Fisher. It is not known if she recognized Lisa because I remind you that they already knew each other. But there was not much time for this, because as soon as he turned his back, Lisa lunged at him. She wrapped a pink rope around his neck that she had brought and began to squeeze with force and without pause until Bobby Joe stopped fighting and fell to the floor. In the struggle, the victim managed to tear out strands of hair from her attacker. With Bobby Joe already unconscious, Lisa turned him over and with a kitchen knife began to open his abdomen. Once it was big enough, she extracted the baby, which turned out to be a girl, and carefully cut the umbilical cord. Then she wrapped the newborn in a blanket and with her in her arms, ran to her red Toyota Corolla and left. She had to drive about. The response is 124 miles. Dr. Mary Chase, chief medical officer and forensic expert, had a much more stark vision of what had happened. In the trial against Lisa Montgomery, she argued that Bobby Joe fought and defended herself much more than was believed. She said that with the first attempt at strangulation, Bobby Joe fell unconscious. It was then that Lisa took the knife and made the first incision in her belly. But while she was doing it, the victim regained consciousness and desperately tried to stand up to fight for her life. Lisa again resorted to the rope she had around Bobby Joe's neck and tightened it until she suffocated her. Evidence of this, says Dr. Chase, is the blood on the soles and toes of the victim. This would indicate that she tried to stand up after she was already bleeding out. She showed the jury the photos of the feet and also of the knife where the 2 strangulation marks could be seen. In addition, the victim had defensive cuts on her hands and a good blow to the bridge of her nose. It had been a brutal crime, since her daughter didn't pick her up from work as they had agreed. Becky Harper walked to Bobby Joe's house. At 3:30 in the afternoon, she opened the door and began to call her. She found her in the back room where the puppy kennels were. Bobby Joe was on the floor in the middle of a pool of blood. Becky immediately called 911, and amidst tears and hysterical screams, tried to explain what had happened, and that there were no signs of the baby. The paramedics arrived immediately, but they couldn't revive her. Bobby Joe was declared dead at 4:27 upon arrival at San Francisco Hospital in Maryville. Unfortunately for Lisa, as I had already mentioned, the victim's hands had several strands of blonde hair. Becky explained to the first police officers who interviewed her that she had spoken with her daughter an hour before finding her, and that she had said she was expecting a visit from a woman from Fairfax, and that just as they were talking, there had been a knock at the door and her daughter had hung up the phone to go greet the murderer. The police quickly began the investigation. They feared that the baby was in grave danger and under high stress after such a violent birth. They proceeded to sound the alarm, and within seconds, the news spread throughout the nation. It was a North Carolina Terrier dog breeder named Diane Sichtar who saw the news and was shocked. She recognized the photo of the murdered pregnant young woman from Missouri. She considered her almost a friend after so many chat conversations. Diane entered the chat and found that everyone was very moved. Looking at the posts from the last few days, wondering what could have happened, she discovered a couple of back-and-forth messages between Bobby Joe and a certain Darlene Fisher. a day before the crime. In them, Bobby Joe and Fisher were exchanging emails and home addresses. The discovery made them suspicious, and she called the FBI to tell them what she had found. She was the perfect investigator. The agents wanted to track down Darlene Fisher, but there was no one in the area with that name. The FBI's computer forensic analysts looked for the IP from where the emails that the murdered young woman had received on her computer came from. What was said by Bobby Joe's mother, coupled with a witness statement saying they had seen an old, dirty red car at the entrance of the victim's property at 2:30 in the afternoon, and the chats that the detectives found on the network led to a 36-year-old woman, Lisa Mary Montgomery from Kansas, on December 17th. In a Melbourne cafe, Lisa and Kevin Montgomery introduced their friends to the supposed new member of their family, Abigail. Lisa told everyone about her maternal adventure that morning. The day before, she had been taken to a health center where the baby was born, after she had supposedly been in a mall and had gone into labor there. Lisa continued to recount that from there she had called her husband at 5:15 telling him the news and had asked him to come pick her up. Kevin took 2 of their teenage children and loaded them into his truck to go pick up his wife and their newborn daughter. In a parking lot, they picked up the mother and the baby and returned in 2 cars. Lisa's red Toyota Corolla was driven by one of the 2 teenagers. The astonished friends believed the story and commented that the baby was small, but looked very healthy. No one could suspect such a macabre story behind little Abigail. On Friday, December 17, detectives were sent to the Montgomery's country house in Melbourne. The hope at this moment was to find the stolen baby alive. They surprised the Montgomery couple sitting on the couch. The Amber Alert was displayed on the television screen. They were broadcasting the news of the crime and the missing newborn. Lisa was holding the baby in her arms. Her perfectly round little head was the first thing that caught the officer's attention. She was clearly a baby born from a cesarean section. She wasn't crying and seemed to be in perfect condition. The agents identified themselves and did the same with the homeowners. Then they began to ask about the newborn. Without blinking, Lisa told the same story she had told her friends. But the police checked at the health center, and there they were told that no baby had been born that Thursday. The couple was taken to the offices to be interrogated, where Lisa slowly began to confess her crime. Lisa Montgomery admitted what she had done, and when they informed her husband, he went into shock. He really had believed that his wife was pregnant, and that Abigail was his daughter. This is, let's say, the official version. But I don't know. I have my doubts about how it was possible that the man didn't realize that everything was a fabrication.
But anyway, let's continue.
Lisa was arrested, and Kevin was never charged with anything. They believed he was not aware of the facts, and Kevin expressed his sincere compassion for the affected family. Once the crime was confessed, the authorities immediately took the baby to the hospital. The newborn's DNA studies quickly confirmed that she was the daughter of Bobby Joe and Seb. During the trial, it became evident that Lisa had been lying to everyone for years. Among the witnesses against her were her 2 husbands, the ex of one of them and Bobby Joe's friend, Jason Dawson, who was the one who put Lisa and Bobby Joe in contact. Carl Bowman, her first husband, was in the middle of a legal battle with the defendant for custody of their children. He testified that his ex-wife could not have children because, as I had already mentioned before, she had already been operated on. Lisa had already invented 5 pregnancies up to that point, 2 while she was still married to Bowman. After they separated, she continued with the fables. Bowman, who was seeking custody of their minor children, had threatened to reveal her lies about the pregnancies. Unfortunately, this may have in some way pushed her to take the final step, as she had been planning the crime for a long time. The day before the crime, Lisa called Bowman and told him that this time, she was going to prove that her pregnancy was real, and that she was not lying, that she would have a baby, and that he was wrong. On his part, Kevin Montgomery stated that his wife had claimed to be pregnant 3 times while they were married. He believed her all 3 times. The first 2 times, Lisa told him that something was wrong with the baby, and they ended in abortions. The 3rd time was the one that ended with the crime. Kevin claimed to have genuinely believed everything she told him, although he acknowledged that a relative of Lisa had told him that she had had her tubes tied. He admitted he didn't know exactly what this meant. In the preliminary hearings, A neuroscientist testified that Lisa had suffered numerous blows to the head from her parents and husbands. These physical abuses could have damaged her brain in that region that controls aggression. Lisa's defense lawyers commented that she was suffering from a psychological pregnancy, a mental condition that can lead a woman to present symptoms of pregnancy and believe that she is actually carrying a baby. The defense doctors also said that Lisa was suffering from depression, personality disorder, and post-traumatic stress disorder. A bunch of pathologies that aim to keep her away from the death penalty. But neither the prosecutor nor the prosecution experts agreed with this diagnosis. The prosecutor assured that Lisa Montgomery planned the murder with premeditation and argued that the terrible abuses she had suffered were not sufficient cause to explain the detailed planning of her crime. Lisa had previously searched the internet on how to perform a cesarean section before this crime. Therefore, Lisa Montgomery was tried for a federal crime because it occurred in 2 different states, kidnapping ending in death. On October 22, 2007, the jury found her guilty of murder, and on October 26 recommended the death penalty for her. On April 4, 2008, a judge officially sentenced her to death. On March 19, 2012, the Supreme Court of the United States denied a clemency petition made by Lisa. At this moment, 52-year-old Lisa Montgomery is awaiting her death sentence, which will be on December 8th. She will become the 3rd woman to be executed by the government since 1927. If you liked this video, don't forget to follow me on my social networks, on my new Facebook as Pepe Mysterio MX, on Instagram as Pepe Mysterio MX, on YouTube as Pepe Mysterio, and on Twitter as Mysterio Pepe. My name is Pepe Cherachero, and this is Pepe Mysterio.